Welcome to this edition of Under the Radar for Saturday, February 11th. And first, a correction. A couple of days ago in my video, The Art of Virtue Signaling, I showed this demonic creature at the NYU protest over a Gavin McInnes speech. In that video, this she-beast claims more than once that she's a professor.
I'm a professor! How dare you!
And so a lot of people, myself included, took her at her word. In fact, most people just nodded their head and said, of course she is, because that's what we've come to expect from them. Well, it turns out she's a performance artist by the name of Rebecca Goyette, and she has her own website that catalogues her various art projects. And yes, I did make the inverted commas sign when I said art, because to me they look more like confused projections of a sexually frustrated feminist with a fetish for seafood. And I'll leave a link to her site below, but proceed with caution. Now, I think it's apt that she's a performance artist, since virtue signaling at its core is little more than a performance of moral grandstanding that achieves no tangible benefits except to ingratiate the performer to other equally confused morons. And intentional or not, Goyette's performance illustrates perfectly the inherent emptiness of virtue signaling. Now moving on to everybody's favourite topic, gender bending. Norway moves towards third gender option for passports. Norway's Labour Party will look at introducing a third gender category if they're voted in power in the general election due to take place later this year. Yeah, I'm sure that's at the top of the wish list for the Norwegian electorate. But what I found most disturbing was the rationale given by Mani Husseini, leader of the Labour-affiliated Workers' Youth League, or in other words, a bunch of commies. I believe all people should have the opportunity to live out their identity and then have to adapt the laws to reality, and not vice versa, he explained. No, that's exactly backwards, comrade. Let Ben Shapiro clear up your confusion.
The idea that sex or gender are malleable is not true. Okay, and I'm not denying your humanity if you're a transgender person. I am saying that you are not the sex to which you claim to be. You're still a human being, and you're a human being with an issue that I wish you Godspeed in dealing with in whatever way you see fit. But if you are going to dictate to me that I'm supposed to pretend that men are women and women are men, no. My answer is no. I'm not going to modify basic biology because it threatens your subjective sense of what you are.
Now, last time this was put up for a vote, it was defeated, but lefties like, now I'm going to massacre this name, Kjetil Kjenseth, said it's only a matter of time before a third gender is written into law, asserting that support is high among younger representatives of several parties. Well, Kjetil, you should know by now that things that are popular amongst young people are often a good contrary indicator for what's good for society. Now, apparently I have 200 Norwegian subscribers, so please give us your thoughts in the comments below. Now, staying on the topic of gender and some good news from Australia. Gender theory banned in New South Wales classrooms. So for non-Australians, New South Wales is Australia's most populated state, home to almost 1/3 of the Australian population. So that's good news for a significant number of Australian kids. New South Wales public school teachers have been banned from teaching gender theory in the classroom after an independent review into the state's sex and health education resources. Students will no longer be taught that gender is a social construct or that sexuality is non-binary, occurring on a continuum and constantly changing. An edict encouraging teachers to de-gender their language will also be scrapped, along with sexually explicit case studies and teaching aids such as the genderbread person.
Oh, Jesus.
Which promotes the idea that there are an infinite possibilities of gender identity. The concept of deconstructing gender derives from 1990s queer theory and is understood to be highly contested. Oh, no shit, Sherlock. Even within the social sciences. According to the New South Wales Education Standards Authority's Statement of Equity Principles, curriculum and support materials should reflect evidence-based research. Yes. Now, I'm glad this has been stopped in its tracks in New South Wales, but Victoria is still going ahead with its Safe Schools program, albeit in a modified form. But all of this crap needs to go away, and what is happening in New South Wales is a good start. Now, staying in the realm of New South Wales education, Sydney University under fire for vet scholarship giving preference to males. The University of Sydney is under fire for a new scholarship of nearly $30,000 that gives preference to male applicants, with the head of the scholarship's office likening it to grants that discriminate against students who are not Aboriginal. Yeah, you see how that works? The Professor Marsh Edwards Scholarship, offered for the first time this year, is available to students enrolled in the postgraduate Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree at the University of Sydney. The successful applicant will receive $6,750 a year for 4 years. The release states that preference will be given to male applicants who are from rural and regional areas with an interest in large animal practice and intended to work in rural veterinary science. News of the scholarship was circulated among veterinary students on Thursday. A female student in her second year of her Doctor of Veterinary Medicine degree told Guardian Australia she was very surprised to see that preference would be given to male students and thought that it was an administrative error. This is how indoctrinated they are. They can't fathom that a male could get preference. The student said, though there were more women in the veterinary medicine program than men, there were more structural barriers to their advancing in the profession. Now, anytime you hear structural or institutional barriers, call them on it. What specific structural barriers are you talking about? Name them. What are they? This is another truth by assertion tactic from the grievance mongers. There was also a gender pay gap compounded by fewer women in senior positions. Nope. Not addressing this for the 1,000th time. She said the university was misguided to offer the scholarship, which she was surprised to learn was not the first to be offered only to male veterinary students. It's poorly thought out, their reasoning. What is she, Yoda now? Strong with the Force? You are. They're not addressing gender inequality in an intelligent way, and I think the university should be held to a higher standard. It seems they care more about money than they do about my being a woman and getting equal opportunities. Oh, how the narcissism is strong with this one. In this woman's myopic view of the world, it's impossible to even conceive that men might be at a disadvantage in some areas. My position on these types of scholarships is that if it's publicly funded, you shouldn't be able to discriminate against anybody. But as the university points out, it said the preference for male applicants had been requested by the donor, and the scholarship was open to all veterinary science students who were overwhelmingly female. Right, so it's privately funded. So if the donor wants to give preference to demi-queer bronies, then they should be able to. Of this year's graduate entry for the Doctor of Veterinary Medicine students, over 90% of the intake is expected to be female. This is a trend seen over the past 5 years, along with an increasing trend away from rural practice. Oh yeah, who would have guessed that? As more and more women enter the profession, less and less want to go out to farms and grab a bull by the balls. They want to work in air-conditioned suburbia with the little kittens and the puppies. The inclusion of males as one of a number of preferences by the donor is to address the current underrepresentation of males in the student cohort. As such, it is consistent with the university's support of actions to address and encourage diversity and underrepresentation in certain disciplines or professions. Now again, I don't believe in any of this diversity or addressing underrepresentation bullshit. Students should be free to choose whatever they like, and if more women choose veterinary medicine and less go into STEM fields, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, and it doesn't need to be addressed. But if you're going to play this toxic diversity game, then it needs to be equal for everyone. It's all about equality, remember? Now listen to this utter moron and sexist bigot, Imogen Grant, a woman's officer, a completely redundant position at Sydney University. The way I think about it, affirmative action should only apply to people who have structural barriers to receiving an education. That's what the exemption in discrimination law is about. So you can procure particular benefits for women in STEM, Aboriginal students, and so on, Grant said. It's not for further advantaging men. It's really quite bizarre. This takes cognitive dissonance to a whole new level. You're the one living in bizarro world, where up is down and left is right. How is it further advantaging men when 90% of the cohort is female and when 60% of undergraduates nationwide are women? And notice she uses the bullshit structural barrier argument about women in STEM. No, idiot, it's choice. If women want to go into STEM, they can. There's nothing stopping them. But here's the kicker. The scholarship was established by Marcia Edwards, a woman, the wife of late Emeritus Professor Marshall Edwards. So the applications for the scholarship are open until February 17th. The University of Sydney Women's Collective is calling on the university to remove male from the eligibility requirements to send a clear message to all students that sexism and discrimination on campus is unacceptable. Yeah, unless that sexism is directed at men. Oh, I forgot. Women can't be sexist. Now, I wonder if the Women's Collective have anything to say about the next article on the religion that's so supportive of women's rights. Muslim conference under fire for deleting faces of female speakers on promotional flyer. Organisers of a controversial Islamic conference in Melbourne have sparked outrage for publishing a promotional flyer with the faces of female speakers blacked out. I'm sure it's just a mistake. Maybe they ran out of ink when they came to do those three faces. And didn't you girls discuss outfits? You can't all show up wearing red. Australian Islamic Peace Conference planners came under fire for putting out the flyer advertising speakers at their conference to be held next month. The pamphlet featured the often smiling faces of 12 male speakers, including controversial Sheikh Shady and prominent community spokesman Kaysar Trad. But critics were furious. The faces of 3 female speakers, psychologist Monique Tui, social worker Nina Trad Azam, and Islamic teacher Jamal Ud-Din, had been replaced with shadowy veils. It's backwards and inappropriate, said a person with knowledge of the conference planning. Oh, do you think? These are knowledgeable and professional women. This reduces them to faceless beings. The source said some prominent Islamic women in Melbourne had protested the flyer to organisers. Several people in the Islamic community were scathing in their criticism on Facebook. When Muslim women are made further invisible by our community, bloody oath, wrote psychologist Hannon Dover. This flyer is wrong on so many levels, said another Facebook commenter. A third said, this is unbelievable. Well, not really. We're talking about Islam here. But obviously, this is a good thing. A double standard is being called out, and it's even better that the criticism is coming from inside the Islamic community itself, because that's the only hope for reform. You can't reform Islam from the outside. It has to come from Muslims themselves. But it would behoove the Islamic critics to recognise that this treatment of women comes directly from their own holy book. It's not a matter of interpretation. Let's just have a quick recap of a few of them. Verse 282 declares a woman's testimony to be worth half that of a man's. Verse 4:3 allows men to have 4 wives and also to have sex with slave girls. 4:11 a son's inheritance should be twice the size of a daughter. 4:34 sanctions the beating of disobedient wives after giving them one warning. Well, I guess she got a warning. So I'm glad the criticism is there, but could we get a little more realistic about where those types of attitudes come from?
At the moment, it's very clear to me that the most toxic form that religion takes is the Islamic form. The horrible idea of wanting to end up with Sharia, with a religion-governed state, a state of religious law, and that the best means of getting there is jihad, holy war, and that Muslims have a special right to feel aggrieved enough to demand this, I think is an absolute obscene wickedness, and I think their religion is nonsense. And
In its entirety?
In its entirety. The idea of God speaks to some illiterate merchant warlord in Arabia, and he's able to write this down perfectly, and it contains the answers to all human. Don't waste my time. It's bullshit.
But you're saying...
So that's going to do it for this week's edition of Under the Radar. If you have any ideas for next week, drop them in the comments. And don't forget to like, subscribe, or consider supporting me on Patreon. See you next time.